When we talk about attention and attraction, we're really talking about human nature, about how deeply we're wired to seek connection and validation. See, attention is a powerful thing. It's like oxygen for relationships. When someone's paying attention to you, it feels like they're telling you you matter, you're seen, you're valued. And that's a feeling we all crave, whether we admit it or not. But here's the twist. The moment that attention is pulled back, something shifts. It creates a space, a kind of vacuum, and in that space, a reaction starts to brew. When you pull back your attention, it's not just about what you're doing, it's about how the other person starts to feel. And let me tell you, there's power in that. Not manipulation, power. The power of understanding how much your energy shapes the dynamic. People don't always realize what they have when it's right in front of them, do they? It's the truth. We get comfortable. We take things for granted, and that's not always intentional. It's human nature. When something feels consistent, when someone's always there, it's easy to assume they always will be. That's when the attention loses its edge. But pull it back just a little, and suddenly it's like waking someone up from a dream. That shift in your energy forces them to notice what they might have been overlooking. It's like stepping out of a warm spotlight and letting the stage go dark. The absence speaks louder than the presence ever did. And here's the beauty of it. That moment of withdrawal, that pause, it's not about being petty or trying to play games. It's about reminding yourself and the other person of the balance, that your attention is not a given, it's a gift that holds weight, value, and meaning. You see, when you pull back your attention, it taps into a universal truth about people. We want what feels just out of reach. There's a spark in the chase, in the uncertainty. It's not about making someone work harder. It's about showing them that their presence in your life should never be taken lightly. And when that realization hits, when they start to feel that absence, it stirs something inside them, restlessness, a curiosity, maybe even a little discomfort, because suddenly they're left with questions they didn't have before. What changed? What did I do or not do? Why does this feel different? That's when the mind kicks into overdrive. It's natural. When the attention they once had isn't there anymore, they start to reflect. And that reflection, that little mirror you've held up by stepping back, it can be powerful. It's a moment of truth, not just for them, but for you too. Because pulling back your attention isn't just about testing them, it's about testing yourself. It's about asking, am I showing up for me as much as I've been showing up for them? And listen, pulling back doesn't mean turning cold or shutting someone out completely. It's not about being unkind or distant. It's about creating space. Space for them to appreciate what they might have overlooked. Space for you to reclaim your energy, to focus on your own well-being. And in that space, something beautiful can happen. It's clarity, it's perspective. It's recalibration of the dynamic that allows both people to see things more clearly. And this is defining what happens next. That depends on them. That's the real test. Because how a person reacts in that moment tells you everything you need to know. Some will lean in, trying to fill the gap they now feel. They'll ask questions. They'll put in effort. They'll show you that your presence in their life matters deeply. Others, they might pull away. They might not react at all. And that's okay too, because either way, you've learned something important. You've seen who they are when the spotlight isn't on them, when they're not being carried by your energy. And let's not forget, this isn't about punishing anyone. This isn't about teaching someone a lesson. It's about understanding your own worth and making sure that the relationships in your life reflect that worth. Because your attention is precious. Where you choose to place it matters, and sometimes The most loving thing you can do for yourself and for the other person is to take a step back and let the absence do the talking. So when you pull back your attention, remember this, it's not just an action, it's a statement. A statement that says, I value me, and I value you enough to let you feel the difference. And trust me, that's a message no one ever forgets. When you pull back your attention, the first thing that happens is confusion. It's natural because up until now, there's been a rhythm, a flow, an unspoken agreement in the dynamic. They've gotten used to how you show up, how you engage, how you're present. And when that suddenly changes, even slightly, it disrupts the pattern. People are creatures of habit, and we notice when something feels off. That confusion is not necessarily a bad thing. It's the beginning of awareness. It's the mind saying, wait a minute, what just happened here? At first, it might not even register fully. Maybe they shrug it off thinking you're busy, distracted, or just having an off day. But then as time passes, that sense of curiosity starts to creep in. They begin to wonder if there's more to it. And let me tell you, curiosity is a powerful force. It drives people to search for answers, to figure out what's going on beneath the surface. It's that little voice in their head asking, why does this feel different? What's changed? That voice doesn't go away easily. It lingers, poking at their thoughts, making them replay moments, conversations, and interactions in their minds. Here's the thing about confusion and curiosity, they're not just emotional reactions, they're doorways. Doorways to reflection, to introspection, to deeper understanding. When someone starts to notice the shift in your attention, it's like holding up a mirror to them. Suddenly, they're looking at themselves in a way they hadn't before. They're asking questions they didn't think to ask. And in those questions, there's a kind of vulnerability. It's uncomfortable, sure, but it's also necessary. Growth doesn't happen in comfort zones. It happens in those moments when we're pushed to examine ourselves and the way we show up in the world. And let's be real, how someone reacts in those moments says a lot about them. Some people will lean into the curiosity. They'll want to know what's going on, and they'll make an effort to understand. They might reach out more, ask questions, or try to reconnect. It's not just about missing the attention, it's about missing you. They recognize that something has shifted and they want to bridge the gap. That kind of reaction tells you they care. It shows you that your presence matters to them, that they're willing to put in the work to maintain the connection. But not everyone will respond that way. Some people might retreat. They might choose to ignore the change, brushing it off as unimportant. Or worse, they might let their pride get in the way. Instead of leaning in, they step back, refusing to engage. That reaction tells its own story, doesn't it? It shows you where they are emotionally, how they handle discomfort, and what they're willing or not willing to fight for. Now, let's talk about what this means for you. When you pull back your attention and see someone's initial reaction, it's important to understand that their response is not about you, it's about them. It's a reflection of their mindset, their priorities, their emotional capacity. And that's the gift in all of this. You're not just learning about them, you're learning about the dynamic between you. You're seeing the truth of the relationship, not through words, but through actions. And actions, as we all know, speak louder than words ever could. What's even more interesting is what happens as time goes on. That confusion and curiosity, if left unresolved, can lead to something deeper, self-awareness. When someone starts to realize that your attention isn't something they can take for granted, it forces them to reflect on how they've been showing up. They might think about the times they've been complacent, the moments they didn't fully appreciate your presence. And in that reflection, there's an opportunity for them to grow, for the dynamic to shift, for things to realign in a healthier, more balanced way. But none of that happens without the initial disruption. That's why pulling back your attention isn't just an act of self-preservation, it's an act of clarity. It's a way of saying without words, I need to know where we stand. I need to see if this connection is strong enough to withstand the absence. Because real connections, they don't just crumble under the weight of a little space. Real connections find a way to bridge the gap. They adapt, they evolve, they become stronger. So when you take that step back and you see the confusion, the curiosity, the questions forming, it's not a bad thing. It's the start of something real. It's the beginning of truth revealing itself. And whether that truth is one that brings you closer together or one that helps you move on, it's a truth worth knowing. Because in the end, the people who truly value you, the ones who see your worth, will always find their way back. And those who don't, well, they were never meant to stay. When you pull back your attention, you create a shift. It's like removing a puzzle piece from the picture. Suddenly, the whole image changes. And in that shift, you force a reaction, whether it's conscious or not. One of the first things that happens is a change in effort and communication. See, when someone feels that void where your attention used to be, it triggers something inside of them. It's not just about noticing that you're not as present anymore. It's about what they decide to do with that realization. For some, it sparks urgency. They start reaching out more often, checking in, or trying to reconnect in ways they hadn't before. You might notice them sending those just thinking about you texts, or they might call out of the blue just to hear your voice. And it's not always about the words. They might show it in other ways. Maybe they suddenly remember something you mentioned weeks ago and bring it up, or they find excuses to be where you are, even if it's subtle. Those small changes, that's their way of saying, I feel the difference, and I don't want to lose what we had. Now, let me tell you something. Effort is a language. It speaks louder than anything else. It shows you where someone's priorities lie. Because when someone genuinely values you, they don't let the gap linger too long. They feel the pull to close the distance, to restore what might be slipping away. And that effort doesn't just come from missing your attention. It comes from realizing your presence matters. It's them saying, I see you, I feel you, and I don't want to take you for granted. But effort isn't always straightforward, is it? Sometimes it shows up in ways you didn't expect. Maybe they start asking deeper questions they hadn't thought to ask before. Or maybe they listen more intently, as if trying to make up for the moments they might have let slide by unnoticed. It's in those little shifts, those seemingly small gestures, that you begin to see their intentions. You see how much they're willing to give when the spotlight isn't shining as brightly on them anymore. And that's where the truth begins to unfold. But there's another side to this, and it's just as important to pay attention to. Not everyone will respond with effort. Some people will pull back even further, retreating into their own world instead of reaching out to bridge the gap. That silence, it tells you something. It's not always a reflection of their feelings. It could be fear, insecurity, or not knowing how to navigate the change. But whatever the reason, their lack of action speaks volumes. It shows you where they stand, how they deal with discomfort, and how much they're willing or unwilling to invest in the connection. And this is where things get interesting, because how someone communicates during this shift isn't just about their words. It's about their energy, their presence, their willingness to meet you halfway. You see, communication isn't just about talking. It's about listening. It's about showing up, even when it's uncomfortable, even when the dynamic has shifted. And in those moments, you learn so much about a person's character. You learn whether they're willing to lean into the discomfort, to face the questions head on, or whether they'd rather avoid it altogether. Now, let's not forget, this isn't just about them. It's about you too. When you pull back your attention, It's not just a test for the other person, it's a moment of clarity for yourself. It's a chance to ask, what am I really looking for here? What kind of effort and communication do I deserve? Because make no mistake, you deserve to feel valued. You deserve to see actions that match words and energy that reflects care and respect. And when someone shows you who they are in these moments, whether through their effort or their silence, you have to believe them. But here's the beauty in all of this. The shift creates opportunities. Opportunities for growth, for understanding, for recalibration. If the other person steps up, if they show you through their actions that they're willing to invest in the connection, it can deepen the bond in ways you might not have imagined. It becomes a partnership rooted in mutual respect, not just routine or convenience. And if they don't, if they let the distance grow, if their silence becomes louder than their words, then you've learned something invaluable. You've seen the truth of where they stand. And that truth is a gift. Because at the end of the day, relationships aren't just about who shows up when things are easy. They're about who shows up when things get real, who puts in the effort, who communicates with intention, who chooses to stand in the gap and say, I'm here, I care. Let's figure this out together. And when you find someone who does that, hold on to them. Because that kind of effort, that kind of connection, it's rare. It's worth cherishing. So when you pull back your attention and you see how someone reacts, whether with effort, silence, or something in between, pay attention. Because in their actions, you'll find your answers. And those answers, they'll guide you to exactly where you're meant to be. When you pull back your attention, you create a ripple effect, not just in actions, but in emotions. One of the most immediate reactions is rooted in the ego. The ego feels the shift loud and clear. It doesn't take kindly to losing the spotlight, to not being the center of someone's focus. It reacts. Sometimes subtly, sometimes dramatically. But beneath that ego, there's a deeper layer, vulnerability. And when attention is withdrawn, it brings both those elements to the surface, exposing things that might have stayed hidden otherwise. The ego is a funny thing. It wants to feel important, admired, validated. When you're giving someone your attention consistently, it feeds their ego, even if they're not fully aware of it. It's like a steady stream of reinforcement that says you're worth noticing. But when that stream dries up, when the energy shifts, the ego is the first to notice. It starts to feel the absence like a void, and that can stir a variety of emotions. Maybe it's frustration. Maybe it's confusion. Maybe it's even anger, because the ego doesn't like to feel replaced or forgotten. But here's what's fascinating. That reaction isn't really about you. It's about them. It's about how they've come to depend on your attention to feel a certain way about themselves. Maybe they didn't even realize it. But when that attention is no longer there, it forces them to confront something they'd rather avoid, their own insecurities. Because let's face it, attention can be a crutch. It can cover up doubts, fears, feelings of inadequacy. And when it's gone, the ego is left to face those things head on. That's when the mask starts to slip and you see what's really underneath. Now, vulnerability is a different story. Vulnerability is quieter, softer, but it's just as powerful. When someone feels the shift in your attention, it doesn't just bruise their ego, it touches something deeper. It creates a sense of uncertainty, and with that uncertainty comes exposure. They might start to wonder, am I enough? Did I do something wrong? Have I lost something important? Those questions aren't easy to sit with. They make a person feel raw, unguarded, and for some, that's a place they're not used to being. It's uncomfortable, it's unsettling. But it's also where growth happens. And this is the thing, not everyone knows how to handle vulnerability. Some people lean into it, allowing it to guide them towards self-reflection, toward understanding what's really happening beneath the surface. But others, they fight it. They cover it up with pride, with deflection, with avoidance. They might act like they don't care. They might even try to flip the script, putting the focus back on you, as if to say, this isn't about me, it's about you. But deep down, they know, they feel it. They just don't know what to do with it. What's important to understand is that the way someone handles that mix of ego and vulnerability says a lot about where they are emotionally. If they can sit with the discomfort, if they can face their own insecurities without running from them, it shows a level of emotional maturity. It shows they're willing to do the inner work, to grow, to evolve. But if they can't, if they let their ego take over, if they lash out or withdraw completely, it's a sign they might not be ready to meet you on the level you deserve. And let me tell you, seeing someone in that space of ego and vulnerability can be revealing, not just about them, but about the relationship itself. It shows you whether the connection is built on a foundation of genuine respect and understanding, or whether it's been propped up by the attention you've been giving all along. That's not always an easy thing to see, but it's necessary, because a relationship that can't handle moments of discomfort, moments of truth, isn't a relationship that can stand the test of time. So when you see someone reacting to your withdrawal of attention, take a step back and really observe. Notice how they navigate that space between ego and vulnerability. Do they step up, showing you they're willing to face their feelings and fight for the connection? Or do they let their pride get in the way, letting the distance grow instead of bridging it? Either way, their reaction gives you the clarity you need to make your next move. Because here's the truth: pulling back your attention isn't just about them, it's about you. It's about reclaiming your energy, your time, your focus. It's about making sure that the people you surround yourself with are capable of meeting you where you are, not just when things are easy, but when things get real. And sometimes pulling back is the only way to see who's willing to step forward. When you see someone's ego rise, when you witness their vulnerability peek through, remember this: you're not responsible for how they choose to handle it. You're only responsible for holding your own worth, your own boundaries. And in doing so, you create space for the right kind of connection, the kind that isn't built on ego, but on something real, something that lasts. When you pull back your attention, something fascinating happens. You create a space, a silence. And in that silence, you give someone the opportunity to sit with themselves. Now, not everyone is ready for that kind of stillness. It's in those quiet moments when there's no distraction, no noise, that a person is faced with the most honest version of themselves. And let me tell you, not everyone is prepared to handle what they see. That's the thing about pulling back. It doesn't just reveal the truth about them to you, it reveals the truth about themselves to them. And that can be a hard pill to swallow. You see, when your attention is constant, it acts like a mirror, reflecting back to them all the things they want to see: your kindness, your care, your effort. They become a source of validation, a reassurance that they're seen, valued, and important. But when you pull back, when that mirror is no longer there, they're left with nothing but their own reflection. And for some, that reflection isn't easy to look at. It forces them to ask questions they might have been avoiding. Questions like, who am I without the attention? Am I truly enough? Or have I been leaning too much on someone else to fill the gaps I don't want to acknowledge? This isn't about punishing someone or playing games. It's about giving them a moment of clarity, a chance to step back and truly evaluate their role in the dynamic. Without your attention constantly filling the space, they're left to consider how much they've been contributing, how much effort they've been putting in, and whether they've been taking your presence for granted. It's not always an easy process, but it's necessary, because growth doesn't come from comfort. It comes from discomfort, from sitting in that stillness and facing the truth head on. Now, here's where things get interesting. How someone reacts to that silence tells you everything you need to know. Some people will rise to the occasion. They'll take that time to reflect, to grow, to understand what they truly value and what they might need to change. You might notice them making small adjustments, showing up in ways they hadn't before. It's not about grand gestures. It's about intention. They start to show you through their actions that they've taken the time to sit with themselves and come out stronger on the other side. That kind of growth, it's powerful, it's meaningful. It's a testament to their character. But not everyone responds that way. Some people, when faced with the silence, will run from it. They'll look for distractions, for anything to fill the void that your absence has left. They might turn to other sources of validation, trying to patch the holes with temporary fixes. And while that might work for a moment, it never lasts. Because the truth is, you can't outrun yourself. Sooner or later, the silence catches up. And when it does, it reveals the truth they were trying to avoid all along. What's important for you to remember is that their reaction is not your responsibility. You're not pulling back your attention to provoke or manipulate. You're doing it to honor yourself, to create space for clarity and truth. And in doing so, you give both yourself and the other person the chance to see things as they truly are. It's a powerful act, but it requires strength. Because sometimes the truth you uncover isn't the one you hope for. Sometimes you realize that the connection wasn't as solid as it seemed, that the other person wasn't as invested as you believed. And while that might be painful, it's also liberating because now you know. Now you can move forward with the kind of clarity that only comes from facing the truth. But let's not forget the other side of the coin. Sometimes pulling back your attention reveals a strength in the connection that you might not have fully appreciated before. It shows you that the other person is willing to step up, to meet you where you are, to grow alongside you. It shows you that the bond is built on something real, something that can withstand the ebb and flow of life. And that realization, it's worth every moment of discomfort. At the end of the day, pulling back your attention isn't about creating distance. It's about creating perspective. It's about allowing yourself and the other person to see the connection for what it truly is, without the noise, without the distractions. And in that space, you find clarity, you find truth, you find growth. Because real connections aren't built on constant attention. They're built on mutual respect, understanding, and the willingness to face the truth no matter how uncomfortable it might be. And when you give someone the chance to sit with themselves, to reflect, to grow, you give them a gift. A gift that not everyone will accept, but one that has the potential to transform those who do. And for you, that clarity, it's priceless. Because it shows you exactly where you stand and who's willing to stand with you. And that kind of, when you pull back your attention, it creates a moment of reckoning. The dynamic changes, the rhythm shifts, and the balance is no longer what it used to be. But the most profound part of this process isn't just in how the other person reacts. It's in how you begin to see yourself differently. Because let's be honest, sometimes we give so much of ourselves to others that we forget to leave enough for ourselves. We lose sight of our worth, of our power in the act of pouring into someone else. But when you step back, you create a space to remember who you are and what you bring to the table. It's a kind of awakening. You start to notice the energy you've been giving away. The energy that you could have been using to grow, to build, to nurture yourself. You begin to realize how much of your time and focus has been spent waiting on someone else to validate you, to reciprocate, to meet you halfway. And in that realization, something shifts. You stop waiting. You stop looking outward for answers that were inside you all along. You start reclaiming yourself. See, pulling back your attention isn't just about testing someone else. It's about resetting yourself. It's about standing in your own power and understanding that your worth isn't tied to how much you give or how much someone else notices you. Your worth is constant, it's inherent. And when you start to see yourself through that lens, you change the way you show up in the world. You stop chasing, stop proving, stop overextending. Instead, you move with confidence, with intention, with clarity. You start giving from a place of abundance, not from a need to be seen or appreciated. And here's the thing, when you operate from that place of self-awareness, it changes the kind of energy you attract. You start to notice that the right people, the ones who truly value you, will rise to meet you where you are. They'll see your worth without you having to shout it from the rooftops. They'll recognize the value of your presence because you've recognized it yourself. But it all starts with that pullback, with that moment of clarity where you choose yourself, not out of spite, not out of anger, but out of love for yourself. Now, this isn't always an easy process. It requires honesty, reflection, and sometimes a little discomfort, because pulling back your attention forces you to confront your own patterns, your own habits. You might realize that you've been overgiving, overcompensating, trying too hard to keep something alive that maybe wasn't meant to last. And that realization, it can be tough. But it's also liberating, because once you see it, you can change it. You can break free from those patterns and start building connections that are rooted in balance and mutual respect. And let's talk about respect for a moment. When you pull back, you're not just demanding respect from others, you're showing respect for yourself. You're saying, I know my value, I know what I deserve, and I'm not afraid to step back and give myself the space to receive it. That kind of self-respect is magnetic. It draws in the right kind of energy and filters out anything that doesn't align with your highest good. It's not about arrogance or ego. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to settle for less than you deserve. But here's the most beautiful part of this process. As you pull back and reclaim your energy, you start to see yourself in a new light. You recognize your resilience, your strength, your capacity to stand on your own 2 feet. You realize that you don't need someone else's attention to feel whole or worthy. You are enough just as you are. And when you move through life with that kind of assurance, it changes everything. It changes the way you love, the way you connect, the way you carry yourself. It's like stepping into a new version of yourself, one that is rooted, grounded, and unapologetically whole. And when you reach that place, the dynamic shifts again. But this time, it's not because of what someone else is doing or not doing, it's because of you. You've become the architect of your own story, the author of your own narrative. You're no longer reacting to the energy around you, you're creating it. And that's a powerful place to be. It's where you find peace, clarity, and the kind of connections that truly matter. So when you pull back your attention, remember that it's not just about what you discover about someone else, it's about what you discover about yourself. It's about reclaiming your power, realigning with your worth, and stepping into the fullness of who you are. And when you do that, you don't just change the way others see you, you change the way you see yourself. And that, my friends, changes everything.